Damn, he's handsome. You've heard rumors of those plump lips. They did not sufficiently mention that enthralling, naturally pursed posture, though. You saw the impossibly perfect jawline on the hand-drawn posters made with the finest tipped quill. You saw the masterwork brushstrokes on the portraits required to shape his flowing mane and those delicate curls. All too good to be true. Too good to be true, you thought when you saw him in his rippled, muscle-shaped armor. Ha! You said to yourself, it's all a facade. Aesthetically designed garb to hide a weakling beneath. A wigmaker's best work used to distract from cragged, alchemically treated lips. You were tasked to hunt down the most beautiful man to ever exist, and when you glimpsed him amid your surprise charge, you saw nothing special in that sudden flash. But then, he fought back. And he kicked your ass. Luckily, you weren't alone, and there's only so many mercenaries the single best fighter you've ever encountered could handle at once. Then upon the settling of the dust and sweat, you were able to properly peer at him through the eye that wasn't swollen shut, and now you stand watch over him, a guard and their prisoner. Even manacled, unwashed, ragged and haggard, bruised and battered, beaten and bludgeoned, tortured and toyed with, from sheer jealousy, or a sheer lack of orders not to, save to leave the face alone, he is the easiest watch you've ever had. Because you can't take your eyes off him. Word has it your employer is not paying in top dollar, but in something equally as valuable. Vital information to some war effort or another that is willing to pay top dollar. And all the employer is paying for is a moment to look upon this man. Foolish. But you almost can't blame them. Damn. He is handsome.
Hey there, creatures, and welcome to Encounter This, a podcast exploration of the creatures from Pathfinder 2nd Edition and the lore that surrounds them. Hello there, creatures, and welcome to another episode of Encounter This. I am your host, James, cannot be copied, and never been more true than it is today. With me, as always, Freeman, a mere reflection, Iced-tin. This should probably be reversed today. And today we are going to be looking at Ledalusca from the Bestiary 3 on page 159. We're going real hard on B3 this month.
We are, yeah. For some reason, it's a really popular book. But hey, we just picked the creatures that strike us true. And as far as pronunciation goes, you did the best I can think of. Ledalusca, no idea. Okay,
we didn't get the etymology or anything for that.
No. I wonder if there's like if someone managed to rearrange the letters. You know, what's the word for that when you change the letters into something else?
Anagram.
There you go. I wonder if someone just created an anagram out of something. That's your challenge, viewers.
Right.
find us the appropriate anagram. Yeah, the Ledalusca was an interesting option for me. I picked it. I mean, on one hand, I really needed to write something that was quick and simple at the time, but also obviously wanted something very interesting and like we've chatted before recently, you know, try and find traits that we haven't been too heavy on recently. So we're looking at an elemental here. And I almost leaned into like, let's go with one of the wood metal ones from the new Rage of Elements. It's a year ago, but you know, one of the newer options. But this one just stood out to me for a flavor reason, and I think it's going to be an interesting, at the very least, homebrew conversation at the end, or like how we would use it.
Awesome.
It's a neat creature. But let's talk about what this is. So this is a water elemental, and we do have an image, but the first thing is to talk about how it's actually difficult to understand what a Ledalusca actually looks like, because in essence, it is a reflective elemental water. Whatchamacallit. I guess technically, if you get to the stat block, you'll actually note that it kind of leans into the fact that it is simply a liquid creature. It is a liquid form, so it can be whatever. But it has this reflective attribute to it that seems to work twofold, as far as I can tell. In one hand, it is a body, quote unquote, of water that reflects images back.
That's a fun
which is
homonym.
kind of vague. Yeah. Thank you. And two, it stores in its memory the reflections it's experienced or have been cast upon it, and could turn itself into an icy frozen reflection of that reflection, as it were.
What are you babbling about over there?
I'm sorry. Can I show you my conspiracy theory map in the back?
I'm going to take it to the image and see what happens. Okay.
Okay. So what we're looking at here is so this is actually, if I'm correct, this is the investigator iconic from Pathfinder, but in an ice sculpture form. I forget his name, but if you quickly Google the investigator iconic, I bet you that's a loose facsimile thereof. It just occurred to me. I didn't actually think of that beforehand, so that's why I'm unprepared.
Pathfinder Wiki doesn't have their classes.
Oh no!
Here we go. Found
it. You get it? Okay.
Investigator Quinn is the investigator. Quinn has really Quinn long hair, though.
All kinds of the artwork. Quinn Pathfinder. Oh yeah, I totally nailed it. if you can squeeze an image in there of Quinn, please do. But yeah, basically, their whole shtick is that they basically store memories of reflections that have been cast upon them, and they take those forms. So their sort of origins or geographical kind of places are on the plane of water. They protect and explore the calmest parts of this plane, because those are the parts that have these massive, shiny, and you guessed it, flawlessly reflective sheets of ice and water. And they have this natural, insatiable curiosity that causes them to obsess about what they think are interesting looking objects. So they just, whatever is in them, oh, there you go. Tell me that's not the same dude.
You are absolutely right. That is 100% the same being.
There you go. Yeah. So it's interesting because there's a reason why it's not one-to-one, which is kind of cool. So basically, they're obsessed with finding interesting looking objects and finding a way to memorize the reflections of them. And it sort of leads them to becoming like almost pickpockets and thieves in a way, because it's not just people, it is objects as well. So sometimes when they travel outside of their plane to other planes, they'll go out of their way to occupy high traffic areas and roads, and they'll search for anything that satisfies this curiosity, which is insatiable. And they can just pretend to be a pool of water, or they can take the form of an ice sculpture that draws the attention of others. Either could draw the attention of others, and because it's so reflective. And then whoever approaches and casts the reflection, well, they've added it to their memory, and they can then replicate it. And they have an infinite memory of reflections. Now, interestingly, though, they are incapable of creating something original. They cannot create to their own image. So that's why it's kind of difficult to what do they look like? They're just water. They're just a pool of water, sort of. They don't have their own form, when it comes to details. So mimicry is their game, and they cannot create something from scratch. And sometimes this is a very vexing thing to the creature itself, because it's intelligent enough to like be frustrated by this. I would assume with more reflections that it acquires. So it's kind of like an artist with all the skill and expertise and talent, but with a permanent creative block, which you can imagine would be very frustrating.
I mean, would it? I guess, I don't know. If I were to compare this to an art form, it would be like fan fiction. Like you're just playing in somebody else's sandbox.
Okay.
Right?
Sure, yeah.
So I don't know if that counts as writer's block. Like you can still do beautiful and unique things with other people's creations.
Yeah.
You just have to work at it. I mean, I guess that's not the point here, but
I mean, it's kind of that's kind of what we do across the board with Uncharted North, right? We're taking other people's ideas and creating something out of it. It is the idea that these creatures cannot create anything wholly original. They cannot create an original likeness of any kind.
Gotcha. So they couldn't like Voltron parts together from other. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they can't do
it. That makes sense. Yeah.
It goes a bit further too. So more than that,
how is this my fucking Voltron move? What is happening to me today?
What's you're having a day?
Jeez.
They are perfectly capable of observing and appreciating something like a vampire. But a vampire has no reflection, which we won't get into how much I don't like some vampire lore. But the fact of the matter is vampires don't have a reflection in Pathfinder and many other folklores and stuff. But this means they are unable to replicate the image of vampire. Reflection is an important aspect. They cannot recreate it. So they can have the memory of what that vampire looked like. They can think upon it, reflect upon it, mentally, reflect upon it, but they cannot recreate the reflection, even though they've observed it, because there was none that was cast upon them. So anything at all lacking a natural reflection stops them from committing it to memory. Well, Quinn's not a vampire. As far as I know.
No, I just mean he's in essentially the same pose, dominant right hand.
Yeah.
Wouldn't a reflection be the other way around?
Oh, well, it's not reflection so much as I know what you're saying. It's not like a switch it around, left to right kind of thing. It's more about the replication at the end of the day.
Okay.
But if it cannot be reflected upon the surface of this elemental, it cannot replicate the image. And since they basically are capable of, like I said, capable of memorizing an unlimited number of images, they find it very confusing to remember one, but are unable to replicate it. And it's a sort of thing that sticks into the back of their mind, like a splinter in a finger kind of thing. They just can't. It's always kind of cumbersome and bothersome for them to know that they've seen it. It should have reflected, but didn't, so they can't replicate. So they have this really kind of constant, like this crazy curiosity and this want and this ability to have so many things committed to memory. But there's like a couple of those things that are niggling at their minds at all times. Furthermore, there's a sidebar here that says that the basically the Ledalusca, it wants to study the details of reflection they've memorized, but it must bring it forth or take its form to study it again. It's a bit of a vague sentence, the start of that, but from what I've gathered, it's kind of like, it takes the form, but it's never like super perfect. And the finer details take some effort. And we'll actually see that reflected in the mechanics of all things. And upon that, they actually cannot store the reflection of reflections. So the reason I use the word reflection for when they take on the image instead of replication is because of this sentence. And it's that if another Ledalusca creates the image, the second Ledalusca cannot memorize it from the first one. They cannot share them. They have to be committed memories from a proper physical reflection.
Right. So I don't know if you said it on air, but use the term facsimile, and I think that's more than appropriate for this, if not outright definable by something like that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Definitely didn't come up that word, but I think it's appropriate as well. I agree.
Yeah. So for our younger listeners, a facsimile is what fax machines are. They take a thing and reproduce it real poorly on some other side. And if you've ever tried to photocopy or fax a fax or a photocopy, it goes south real fast.
Yeah. But ultimately, when it goes the one-way direction, it's not great, but it gets the point across is the idea. Yeah. It's enough to know what's happening.
So a facsimile is a shoddy reproduction. Or an attempted reproduction is probably more accurate. It just often ends up being shoddy.
Yeah. So despite the fact that they actually can't like copy a reflection of a reflection from another Ledalusca, they do enjoy showing them off to each other. And it's a bit of a collector's kind of thing for them. And in some cases, they actually consider being presented with something, a particularly interesting reflection, as sufficient payment for information or aid. So if you're like, I've got this really cool thing, I'm going to describe it to you. If you do this thing for me, I will show it to you. I'll have it reflect upon you, and then you can have that memorized, which I think is a really, really neat social dynamic to this creature.
Yeah. I mean, you add that to the Ledalusca talent shows, and I'm here.
What do you mean? Talent shows?
They're showing reflections to each other.
Oh, God. Oh, that's the new big circus in town, isn't it?
I mean, why not, right?
Yeah.
Just a bunch of conscious water elementals doing their best impressions. I've paid good money to go see somebody do bad impressions.
Yeah. I think what's one of those interesting things is that because they can't share them, and they can't share the reflections, and they can't produce anything original themselves, which means they can't create amalgamations of things they've memorized. It would be my guess. So they can create these facsimiles and near perfect things, but that's kind of the limit. They can't mix and match. They can't, blend genres, as it were.
Right.
They're stuck with they're stuck with specific things, but with a certain lack of detail at all times. I feel like that just describes a huge part of my life. My profession.
You got the point across.
I love
Whether
it.
or not
I
that's going to induce an emotional crisis is something we can talk about off air.
There's not really much the way of mythology and mythlore and folkology. I was literally going to say mythlore and folkology.
We're both having a day. Sorry, listeners.
We're having a day. But I do have a couple quick points. You can put the splash screen up if you want, but not really. Basically, I mean, mirrors and reflections, they show up in a lot of various bits and pieces. There's obvious ones, like Narcissus falling in love with her own reflection, Perseus beating Medusa with the mirrored shield. I learned today that catoptromancy is the word for practicing divination and future reading through a mirror or crystal ball. But I couldn't find anything related to a creature obsessed with gathering reflections.
So I got something for you.
Of course you do. Everyone open their comic books.
Nailed it. So that catopromancy, is that kind of like the Snow White, like divination through the mirror on the wall, that kind of thing? Is that Snow White, or is that Sleeping Beauty?
I don't remember which one that is. You said that.
Well, one of those.
I think it's Sleeping Beauty. No.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I have no idea.
Call in. Lines are open.
Shit.
I think probably the most apt comparison to this creature would be the Marvel Comics villain, Taskmaster.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if you're familiar with Taskmaster. They recently made an impossibly mediocre cameo in the Black Widow movie, which was excellent. One of my favorite Marvel movies. But them in it was really not a great representation. But them as a character, what they do is they watch other superheroes, and then by watching, they absorb all of their moves so they can counteract their entire move set. So there are several instances where Taskmaster will fight Captain America, but use Black Panther's move set to do so.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Or like Storm's moveset or Spider-Man's, and they're I forget what kind of their ability is called, but essentially they see something and then they can mimic it flawlessly, and they use that specifically in fighting styles, and they can't create their own, and it's really hard for them if you get creative. So anytime you that's how they're beaten almost every time, is using something outside of your normal purview. So if you train, Spider-Man trains with the X-Men, he uses an X-Men move, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay.
Easier to beat Taskmaster that way because Taskmaster knows how Spider-Man's going to fight.
It's like the inverse of studying someone's tactics to anticipate them. It's like you're obligated to see what they're doing and then replicate it, and then hope that they don't know how to counter their own shit. Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
That's
and
pretty
then
cool.
they can switch up their fighting style as necessary. So Taskmaster has a shield because they've studied Captain America. They've got all of these other this arsenal of weaponry that they're masters on. Bow because they've studied Hawkeye, et cetera, et cetera. So
I feel like Taskmaster is not only an extremely appropriate word for that power, but it seems really cheesy at the same time. I've mastered all your tasks.
Even their look is really cheesy. So like,
is it?
I really like Taskmaster.
Sure.
I think they're a really good villain for the most part. But I'm gonna try and pull up an image here.
Okay.
I'm gonna try and pull up one of the original, like the 80s Taskmasters. They're so not great. Yeah,
not great. Not great.
Vamp will add this.
Okay, vamping. Vampires have no reflection. They can't walk through thresholds that you haven't invited them in. These are stupid things. They can't cross running water because water, runs as opposed to walks or strolls. Stupid things about vampire lore. This is my vamp. Oh, here we go.
Okay, Taskmaster. Just amazing. Yeah. Bright orange cape, ridiculous. Skull mask, underwear on the outside, ridiculous. Frilled boots always like you'd expect. Yeah, got to be on the outside. That's how you keep everything together.
got the. So this is Marvel, obviously. It's up the top there.
Yeah,
but I couldn't help but notice the rope, which made me think of Wonder Woman.
Right. I actually don't know who that's for, but the sword is Swordmaster, the bow is Hawkeye, the shield is Captain America, and I don't know who the rope
is. Is the face Doctor Doom?
No, the face is actually a really interesting skull. Like it's a skull mask. I also don't think their identity's known, which is really interesting because there's not many characters in Marvel whose secret identity hasn't been revealed over the years. But
it's like one of those ones that's always. Or mostly always been kept a secret. That's cool.
Yeah, kind of. At least as far as I read, maybe with the early aughts that's changed, or some deeper Avengers lore that I don't have. But this character makes an appearance in almost all media. It's in almost every cartoon. It's in all the comic books. It's they're in the Black Widow movie, and they are going to be in the upcoming Thunderbolts movie, if I'm not mistaken.
Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well. Thanks for filling the episode. We ain't far in.
It feels like we should be a lot farther.
Doesn't it, though? Let's talk about mechanics then, shall
we? Yeah, there we go.
Disappointingly, this is a low-level creature, but I maybe I have some ideas I'll come up with along the way. I have an idea concept, I guess. But this is a level 2 creature. I guess it is fitting for something you might encounter along like the high traffic road or some such. Good early intro creature maybe.
I mean, it's superpowers that makes ice sculptures, which are notoriously fragile. So CR2 fits.
Yeah. Well, it makes an what looks like an ice sculpture, not an ice sculpture.
That doesn't affect the fragility as far as I can tell. But,
yeah. Well, you go and attack it, and it's going to have a different effect, right?
right.
So level 2 creature, AC 17, HP of 40, medium in size. Keep it into the kind of the humanoid look. Traits are cold, water, and elemental. No surprises there. Arcana and nature rolling in there is the appropriate DCs for DC 16 and then the reductions thereof. It does have a land speed of 25 and a swim speed of 30. So should it be in water, it's going to move around pretty quick. Language is Thalassic, used to be Aquan, so that's the new water elemental language, and has dark vision because why not? Strength of 4, dex of 3, con of 2, 0 int, 2 wisdom, 1 charisma. It's got a little boost here to acrobatics with a 7, athletics with an 8, deception with a 5, stealth with a 9, and thievery with a 7, which are all fairly befitting. It's dexterous and strong, and it's trying to pick your pockets, because it wants to find things.
Works for me.
So fortitude.
Can we just take
is
a moment
8.
to talk about how good of a change from Aquan to Thalassic is? Thalassic is
for real. Thalassic's
so
perfect.
Much better. Yeah.
It's so
for
good.
those uninitiated in ancient Greek, it means pertaining to or of the sea.
If you have a fear of the open water, it is thalassophobia.
Yeah.
And we should all have this fear because the water is terrifying, especially the open water. It cares nothing for you.
Talking to me, who's going to go get blitzed and watch Blue Planet after this, I'm sure.
I'm okay with it at a distance, or let someone else do the legwork. As it were.
Open ocean is scary. I get that. I get it.
I'm a terrible swimmer. That's my problem.
I don't think swimming is going to be your problem if you find yourself in the open ocean. You got a fish to fry there, bud.
Here I am in the middle of the ocean trying to fry fish. My priorities are all wrong.
That being said, listeners, if you are ever stranded in the open ocean, don't swim. Fucking just tread. Just exist. Conserve your energy. Do not try to reach land. You almost certainly will not.
You won't do it. Fortitude of 8.
Not safety advice.
Reflex 9. Will of 6. It does have weakness to fire 5. And it is immune to cold, paralyzed, poison, and sleep. Right, yeah, I know. Nice. I see you raising your eyebrow there.
I hate that ice is weak to fire. It makes me real. Just hurts my brain some days. Yep.
No, so now, if it was just a water elemental, it only had the water trait and it had weakness to fire, I would have some objections. But it is a cold trait that is attached to it as well. And I think that's an important factor. And it plays into what we're going to cover next a little bit. So whether or not you think it should be a weakness is debatable, but it does have a little extra here.
I'm actually fine with it. In my mind, normally this would be 10, but since it's got the water and cold trait, they've knocked it down to 5. So I'm actually pretty cool with that.
Yeah, well, actually the 5 is more indicative of its level than those traits. You don't get 10 until a bit higher level. You don't get 15 until a bit higher, because remember the horizontal progression, right? Your resistances and your weaknesses will progress at the same rate, and it's kind of a level range in which they do.
I always forget how tight this math is.
Yeah. She tight. So the reflection. So let's talk about a passive. It's called Recall Reflection. We expect it's you can recall and replay any reflection cast upon its surface. It still needs to take the seek action to consciously notice any fine or significant details. This, I was a little bit confused at first as why they worded it this way, and I realized it's not because it's about finding the details of the reflections so they can reflect it with perfection. It's that it's probably because they're trying to search for interesting things to steal or pickpocket. Yeah. So this little bit of a mechanic is where it implies that they don't perfectly mimic everything with the finest of detail, because the finest of detail is still lost upon them unless they seek it out. So whatever details you see on this picture we're seeing now, like the dangling chains and the little patterns on the clothing, were probably the result of looking a little bit closer. But otherwise, they're not one-to-one, right? So it's kind of an interesting take, and I think, and ultimately, I feel like the artist did an incredible job to reflect said mechanic, as it were.
Yeah, definitely missing some details, like some nuance, but
yeah,
really, really good reproduction.
Really cool. Yeah. They have a melee attack called Wave, which very much implies that it's in a liquid form. Wave with a +10 to hit, 1d6 +4 bludgeoning, plus push 5 feet, which is a reasonably new addition to the creature ability list, which is basically a shove, but like, creatures have their own list compared to the PCs. So they can wave attack in melee, bit of bludgeoning, bit of a pushback away. They also have a ranged attack called Ice Shard. So +9 to hit, has the deadly D6 trait, and from 20 feet. So it's a thrown attack, not just simply a ranged attack. Shorter range, 1d6 +4 piercing, plus 1d4 cold, where it matters.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's all right. It's pretty all right for level 2. It's not no slouch.
Yeah.
It's got a single action called Freeze Shell. This is where it really gets kind of important. So the cold and manipulate trait, which is very important for any of your low level parties with a fighter. Reactive strike, my friends. This is basically causes it to freeze its own surface to a translucent, faintly colored ice sculpture, matching the mirror image of a medium creature or object that they have seen before. And while in this form, they replace the wave attack with the following, which is Ice Shell. So they swap out this wave bludgeoning push with Ice Shell, which is a +10 to hit, same to hit, and 1d4 +4 physical damage plus 1d4 cold. So they're basically swapping out cold for push.
Okay. That makes
sense.
Sense.
By freezing their shell. However, I think I might have said it wrong here, but the ice shell damage is it's not 1d6 specific damage, it's physical damage. So it depends on the image they took on. So if they take on the image of someone with a rapier, it's doing piercing damage. If they took on the image of, I don't know, a chest of drawers, and they decide to punch the drawer out to hit somebody, that it's bludgeoning, but it's always a physical damage. But they can take whatever the form is. You have to kind of decide which physical damage it is, but it's adding cold on top of it. They can use the same one action to revert back to a liquid form as well.
I just keep picturing, I don't know why this came to me so viscerally, but I just keep picturing like this, like a ye old English rube just like dragging his armoire to a puddle so it can see it. A tricorn hat and a ponytail.
Ever seen anything like this? Hey, I have an antique shop. Come
where
in.
Where are you taking them chest of drawers? Oh, I'm taking it over to the puddle. It knows where its gold is.
You've lost your mind. Oh, I love it.
Love that.
There's a part of me that was totally thinking about like Beauty and the Beast and all of the animated objects in the whole castle. Oh, shit. Also has a single action called Hold Still with the Concentrate trait. Until the next time it acts, the Ledalusca appears as to be either an ice sculpture or a pool of still water.
Automatic result of 28 deception on checks and DCs to pass this in whatever capacity it needs to. So
That's
very
pretty good.
high for a low level creature, which is pretty stock standard for creatures of the, that kind of hinge on, faking it, usually for the purposes of surprise.
And then Bobby Drake ever did that mid-fight with Magneto, just stops on a dinner table.
I'm just part of the event that you're crashing. That's good. It's got one reaction, which is called shell block. So the requirements is that it does have to have used freeze shell already, so its shell is frozen, and the trigger for the reaction is that it has taken physical damage. It basically angles itself to absorb the blow, and it gains resistance 5 to the damage. If it takes bludgeoning or fire damage after applying the resistance from this reaction, the frozen shell shatters until they form a new one, which is a nice little point of detail. And the way this is worded, it took me a sec, and it's especially for new GMs, it's probably important to note that the order operations on when resistance comes in and how things affect it after is like something you really have to understand and remind yourself of. So the way this is worded, what it is that, let's say it's in its shell form and you swing a warhammer at it and it uses the reaction to reduce the damage you deal by 5. The warhammer is doing bludgeoning damage. If you deal 5 bludgeoning damage, it's resisted the whole thing. If you deal 6, it's taken 1 damage and you've knocked it out of its shell form because it's bludgeoning. So it's after that damage. If you're swinging with a warhammer that has a flaming rune on it and you deal 5 bludgeoning but 2 fire, same effect. The 5 is negated, but the fire went through, broke the shell. In a small way, it's a bit of a hard thing to get your head around sometimes, but the order operations on that resistance and the effects thereafter can be really important sometimes. So I think this is a really cool indication, low-level indication of how that can come into play.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like shield block to me.
In a way, for sure.
Yeah,
but whatever excess damage has an extra effect depending on the damage. Yeah.
I mean, kind of, I guess. It does get rid of your freeze shell, but so does shield blocking. You can't shield block again. It already burned your reaction. You got to spend an action to raise the shield again, which is what freeze shell is.
But in this case, losing the free shell changes the damage type and amount of damage you're experiencing from the creature until it spends an action to put itself back in that place, right? I think that's where it's more important. It's like, oh shit, if this thing's hitting me with, slashing plus cold, and I would rather it hit me with bludgeoning plus push, go that
absolutely.
direction.
Yeah. I'm not as a high level overview of the combat, but if a new GM needs shell block simplified, just treat it like shield block. Yeah. And then the free shell is you raising your shield. It is, like you said, way more nuanced than that. But if you need a lowest common denominator, that's probably the best through load we're gonna get.
Yeah. But yeah, that's this creature. That's its stat block. It's not really aimed at attacking you. It's aimed at kind of deceiving you, maybe taking something away from you, which maybe makes you attack it. But it's capable of fighting you to a degree. It's got its abilities, but it's not an overly hostile creature by nature. And it's really about curiosity. And I really love the idea that it's willing to wheel and deal over the idea of having another reflection committed to memory, which I think is a cool, like I said before, a cool social element that you can play with. But yeah, that's the stat block.
Cool. Well, let's jump into the homebrew then.
So, what do you think? Anything that you would change off the top of your head? Any ideas of how you would use this in a encounter or situation or what have you?
Yeah, a couple of things. As far as changing the creature goes, not a whole lot. Like it's simple in its majesty, and I think it's simple probably for a reason. Um, I get that the wave attack is really only there for when your free shell goes away, because it's gonna go away.
Yeah.
Almost certainly. But like you said, I don't think I would use this as a primary antagonist.
Yeah.
I like the idea of it just being like like a wishing fountain, like just a fountain filled with coins.
Yeah.
But instead of people throwing them in, it just goes and takes them. And I like the idea of it like stalking the party in this ice sculpture form, like just slowly moving down and then concentrating, freezing like an old bandit movie.
Okay.
And stealing something from the party. And I like the idea of the party having to get that thing back. So maybe it takes something. Yeah, so I would probably use this as like a hindrance or a roadblock. Like you've got your MacGuffin, you're on your way to deliver your MacGuffin to your arbiter of your fetch quest, and it takes the MacGuffin as you're walking through, and you kind of don't really know what was happening. I'd probably use it mostly in that kind of an aspect. I also love the idea of like 30 of these just lining a lining a room and being used as like the king's guard or something like that.
I was at one point reminded of when we were running Rime of the Frostmaiden in 5e, and like we got to the proper icy place and we saw like these frozen creatures and stuff. I was like, how cool would this creature be in that scenario at the right level?
Yeah.
So I definitely reflected upon that. I also thought about the idea of like, oh, how cool would this be? Like, there's a whole bunch of them, and like this weird, eerie walk into this ice citadel, and there's a whole bunch of them that they all turn out to be water elementals, and they're there to mess your day up. But I also like, I really have a hard time having them being especially individually being a hindrance to the party, something that's in the way. They seem to me like a stepping stone creature in the way that a lot of Fae are, where they're like encountered along the road, but the road, to be the road almost needs to be icy for it to be convincing. But I actually really love your idea of them being part of a wishing fountain. I think them taking refuge in a wishing fountain in like a populous area is a really cool idea. And the fact that they have this high stock standard automatic result of 28 deception means that there's this rumor that floats around about the water or the creature in the fountain. And most people don't catch it because they don't have, the average citizen has no ability to notice. They don't have the proper plus to their perception, as it were. And it could be really cool to have the party like investigate said rumor and then come up with nothing and then walk away and then go back at one point and try and investigate and come up with nothing, and just continue to have them repeatedly see what the hell is up with this goddamn fountain, and it just turns out to be
face staring back at them.
Yeah. And it almost doesn't matter at that point that it's a level 2 creature. It's more about the social interaction and the finding out of the secret, and maybe it has information to give because it's sitting there observing the entire world around it in the middle of a metropolis, maybe, or a town square, and then suddenly it's a bargaining tool, and you have to bring it something that's cool for it to give you information. Like, that social aspect, I think, is the coolest part of it. Forget the freezing part.
Yeah,
and like,
maybe it witnessed like a clandestine meeting or something like that, but you only know one of the parties involved, and you needed to take the shape of the other party, and it's like,
how fun would that be? Yeah, and like, imagine it's a town like not unlike the ones we know in Canada, where in the wintertime things get frozen over, and part of the mystery is that different random sculptures get formed in the fountain, and no one sees it happening, but it happens all the time, and it's part of the mystery of the town and the fountain.
Yeah, maybe
and
it's a small town, and that's the town's claim to fame is these ever-changing ice sculptures that look like people who've passed through or some shit.
Exactly. Yeah. How awesome would that be? So yeah, I really dig that side of the creature. I think it's a really fun. The thing that I feel like is missing to make me want it to be more of a combat creature is that it's low level, and I think it would be cool to have a variant where the more even a template setup like Pathfinder does sometimes, where the more memories it has, the more it becomes a encounter worthy creature, where it can turn into something large, or it can have these extra abilities that it's copied, or like these weird facsimiles of like, I've seen this creature do this thing, I can do something like it, but not quite the same, and kind of feed it into some inspiration of like, have this one elemental creature feed into inspiring you, making like loose variants of others, and build a template off that. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you want to keep it simple, just give it hydraulic maneuvers, and I think you'll be okay. I know it's a 13th level feat, but not
go to town.
Not super worried about it being a 13th level feat. It essentially just allows it to, athletics, disarm, trip, or shove from 15 feet with water.
Yeah,
you just cool. cut the feet there, and you're fine.
It's easily attached to a higher level creature. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you can just pull inspiration from like popular culture. Look at the Avatar of the Last Airbender for some water moves. Maybe it unfreezes its arms and it does the waterbender octopus.
See, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, or maybe it does the Iceman glide where it freezes the ground and it somehow it keeps its momentum going through the ice, and that's how it moves, and it moves faster, and it gets like a shoulder check move. So it freezes the ground and slides into you like Sub-Zero.
Yeah.
I
love that, because I mean, I really take that taskmaster route almost, in creating more variants for this creature. Give it a higher level, add some abilities, but have them very, very specifically copied in not one-to-one ways, and play with that.
If you were to do this at a higher level and like this was a recurring creature, you just take one of the PC's character sheets.
I mean, especially if it had like a long ability to like observe them, by all means. Like it's a common trope to have it like, oh, you have to face the shadow of yourself and it's doing all the same things you do, it's so tropey. It's fun, it's dramatic, but like why not this strange water elemental observer that really just wants that weird thing in your pocket? And that's motivation. It's like Fey trickster-esque, and I love that.
I like the idea that it's not malicious. It's more like childish than anything.
It just wants to satisfy its curiosity, and it's happy to exchange, and maybe it'll go at strangely hostile lengths to do it, but because it's doesn't really care about you.
Well, at a higher level, if you're a GM and you ever wanted to play a character, just do it this way. Oh, I want to play an alchemist. Well, all of his bombs do water damage. Done.
Sure.
It's
just to fake these bombs.
Or like I feel like learning how to play a sorcerer. Okay, but it's all water and ice now. Like
it summons a water bludgeoning version of like black tentacles or something, that occult spell,
or like an ice pick for spiritual weapon or something.
Sure. So I think there's a lot of room to play with it and give it more options. So it's a cool little inspirational creature. I think as is, I don't really think I'd use it as is, other than the fountain thing. The fountain thing, I think I think is really cool. And I'm so glad you mentioned it, because it definitely didn't occur to me, that sort of setting. But like the idea of it being in a cultural center, like as a permanent showpiece almost that's hiding, like I think it's so cool.
Well, yeah, it was you who actually put that image in my mind when you said fountain right off the top, and I don't know if that was your intention, but I've just been picturing
Certainly
people throwing
wasn't, no.
change
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just sitting there because it would get to absorb all these people. It would get to see life, which is kind of seems like its only ambition is to learn.
That's its bag. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think it's a really neat creature. I think it's a cool idea. I think it borrows with. I really think the cleverness of this creature is that it borrows a lot without properly reflecting it.
Yeah.
You know, there's something really cool about that. It's very meta in a way.
This could also be a quest giver too, right? Like if we flip the script, like this ice sculpture approaches you slowly in the street to tell you that a child's been kidnapped or something.
Yeah.
And it'll show you what the child looks like. It just needs your watch.
just needs your watch, or it needs you to bring something that it's heard about that sounds really cool, and it wants to see this reflection. So I was like, I will show you the information.
A portrait of the king, so it can make a bad 2D image.
It's just this flat.
Yeah,
it's flat.
Why not? I want to know who the king is, and you show up with a portrait, and it can only produce images in 2 dimensions.
I've heard about this king fella. Please show me his image. The basic scratchings in the local newspaper aren't enough. I need something more elaborate.
Yeah, it's something better than a couple of copper pieces flicked into a fountain.
A good comedy bit at the end of the day. There's no doubt about it.
And it would also, like, as a wishing well, it would also know, like, people's deepest, darkest secrets, because people will whisper it and then flick a copper into the fountain. Be like, okay, well, I know how to help these people because turns out all they want is a vaccine for polio. Okay.
Yeah.
Go get it.
That's just it. It's like, I think it's probably one of the coolest things is that it's not, it's all about the reflections and how it can replicate them and whatnot, but it doesn't mean the creature's not listening, you know?
Yeah.
Really, it doesn't mean it's not listening. It doesn't mean it's not watching. Which is a neat concept to play with.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of poor reflections, I'm sure all of the listeners have seen this before, but if you want to help us make these shows, you can find us at patreon.com/unchartednorth. $5 a month will get you a handwritten letter. $10 will get me to stop doing what I just did, as well as your ability to suggest a creature from any system you want. You can do this one. We've had some from 13th Age, just whatever you're feeling. Maybe there's a water elemental in Starfinder you want us to cover or something. If you like our logos, our little critty boy down there, the UN compass, or any of our Patreon tiers, all that art is available for sale in various different forms at unchartednorth.com/shop. No matter what platform you're on, our socials are down in the below if you want to check out our Instagram or our Twitter. Not really sure why I hit that E like that, but I did. I? Is it an I? It's an I.
That was a Latin I.
Right.
Tweeter.
Too much John Oliver, I think. If you want to find the documents how we made these shows, there's always usually a reading list as well as pertinent links included. You can find all that stuff over at encounterthis.ca. It also acts as a pretty interesting archive of our previous shows. You can go back and see all the other episodes we've done. If you don't feel like scrolling through your podcasting, they're also completely listenable over on there. Wherever you are, audio, video, however you're consuming this, we'd appreciate a rate and a review. We would like to know what you think of the show. We don't just want positive comments, critiques, criticisms, though those are all helpful things as well. Even if you hate us, I'd love to see that in the comments. Like, at least we know. I'm not going to bed wondering if Gary from Alabama still hates me. I know that Gary in Alabama still hates me. That would help.
We're just happy that Gary gave us attention at all.
From Alabama, throw us an email. We'll give you a free creature. info@encounterthis.ca. The most important thing you can do for us and any other show you consume is to tell a friend. Word of mouth is so impossibly helpful when it comes to stuff like this, and we outright refuse to put ads on it. So the more people you tell, the more Patreon, the better it gets. You know, when we got up to episode 100, we got to start doing video. This wasn't something that was available to us when we first started, because we didn't have the time, the money, or the know-how to do it. But we got there because this was one of the things our audience has requested. They want to see the images as we're talking about them. They want to see, if you looked up the dictionary definition for podcast, they want to see that, which is, obviously two white guys with beards talking about shit.
Obviously that.
But, the Voltron hand things and the images, I think they all make up for it. So we appreciate you having you around, and we appreciate anybody.
I hope the amount of faces I make while you're rambling on this part of the episode. I assume you're not looking at my camera when
I
this
am
happens.
not, but I'm dying when I go back and edit, because I have to find that outro timestamp, and then I just watch you do shit for like I'm not listening to the audio either. It's just you making faces and hand gestures.
I just take it as my opportunity to really fill that video content.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. One of us is a showman, the other one is a face for radio. We'll let you figure out who's who, but when you do, pop in to our Discord at unchartednorth.com/Discord and let us know, because I don't think we know either. Thank you so much, listeners, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks with whatever happens next.
Remember, fake it till you make it. Just like what was it called? Ledalusca.
Ledalusca. Ice is nice. Tell your friends.
Until next time, creatures, thanks, as always, for listening to Encounter This.